Rejoice, for we are in the midst of a fighting game revival. Fighters blew up in 90s arcades, totally oversaturated the market, and completely fizzled out. But a few years ago, big comeback, now there's loads of them. One of the really unique things about fighters is that no other type of game is so clearly subdivided. I call it the 3 pillars of fighting games. 2D fighters, which are all directly inspired by Street Fighter II, 3D fighters, which are all directly inspired by Virtua Fighter, and mascot fighters, the new wave of games built around multiplayer that started with Super Smash Bros. Just to be totally clear, when I say 2D fighter, that's a reference to gameplay on a 2D plane. It doesn't have anything to do with the graphics, okay? This is a 2D fighter, this is a 2D fighter. With very little exception, every fighting game falls very neatly into one of these categories. But actually there is another pillar. Abandoned, forgotten, one of the very few examples of a dead video game genre. The Kung Fu game. After Street Fighter II hit the scene, the mold for fighting games was set and nobody ever looked back. One game became the literal definition of a genre, kind of like Super Mario Bros. Or Doom. But there were fighting games before that. A lot of them. It was a pretty popular genre. These pre-SF2 fighting games can be referred to succinctly as Kung Fu games. With no formula for success to work with, developers were left to design a game based on actual fighting. And not just the West Side Story face-punching of Urban Champion, but the elegance of martial arts. In fact, most of these games had the word karate in the title. Some of the biggest hits of the era were Karate Champ and Way of the Exploding Fist, which are some of the only games that have ever taken martial arts seriously. Attacks are careful and deliberate. A single successful blow is all it takes to win a round. If you've ever seen a real karate fighting competition, it isn't violent, it's a competition of form and strategy. On the flip side of this, Konami's AR Kung Fu really embraced the 30-foot jumps and flying ninja stars that we're all pretty familiar with from today's fighting games. It's probably the most well-known of all the Kung Fu games these days, and really the only one that's been given any kind of update on modern consoles. But I guess that makes sense. With its simple controls and colorful style, it feels like what you would expect from a precursor to Street Fighter II. But that is exactly the point of view that keeps Kung Fu games obscure in the middle of a huge fighting game revival. If you're looking into these games now, you're most likely looking for the historical context of the game you already know. The evolutionary timeline that ends with Street Fighter II. Like if you love Super Mario Bros. 3, you can trace that back through the original Super Mario Bros. And Mario Bros. Arcade, all the way back to Donkey Kong. But for Street Fighter II, that timeline doesn't exist. So how do you react when you're looking for a little backstory and find a whole different genre there instead? Well, in most cases, you probably just ignore it. But hey, that's fine, I get it. You're busy. I mean, you still gotta figure out all of Zangief's option selects. And also what option selects are. Except, there is one Kung Fu game that you can't ignore, no matter how much you try. Oh, you can hide it away, pretend it isn't there, but you always knew this day would come, because it's finally time to come face to face with Street Fighter 1 next week.